So do we make fake music, or do we just start in?
Let's just do a drum roll.
Hello, beer lovers, and welcome to another exciting episode of You Can't Brew That on Television. We are your hosts. I am the Reverend Ryan Bono.
And I am Kyle, X-Men First Class LaPointe.
And we are here as we are every Monday. Well, not next Monday.
Right.
We're here as we are for the last few Mondays, and then we're going to skip a Monday.
And so the Monday after next.
For a few Mondays. To help you bridge the gap between beer snob and frat boy. Kyle, what are we doing tonight?
We are being German frat boys.
We are being German. Actually, I'm going to go get some beer.
Get some German frat boys.
Why don't you talk about what you're drinking right there? And I'll go get a few more.
Okay, Bono's going to get a couple more, as I am drinking Polliner's Oktoberfest Märzen. Oh my goodness, great beer, right? I mean, the best part about this beer is that it's only available, it's only really produced one time a year. I think they actually make it more often, but then they kind of pump it out everywhere. But that's just really, really good stuff. And Oktoberfest style is really nutty. It's got a lot of bread flavors and toast. Really no caramel. It's just sweet, bready. It is liquid bread, like you hear people talking about beer. And Polliner is a prime example. Just did that beer tasting exam the other day and had the Polliner and rated it a 44, just like the proctors, the judges who were grading, basically rated it a 44. You don't know what it is. You don't know that it's that. You think it may be somebody's homebrew, and it stands up against people's homebrew, which to me, that says a lot, because homebrew, it's a lot easier to be better with your homebrew than it is to be better with a commercial brew, because you're talking about having to make it at such a scale and having to do things to keep it fresh.
Yeah, consistency, freshness, especially given the fact that this has traveled from Germany. You know, we've talked a lot on the show here the last few weeks about buying American beers, but we are ending our Oktoberfest series with German beers. These are actually from Germany.
Right.
We're having, as Kyle was just discussing, we're having a Polliner, and then we're going to have a Spaten Oktoberfest, which is one of two beers that actually claim to have started it all. So, you've already kind of discussed the flavor profile.
Yeah, it's really good, and it smells like it tastes. I mean, it's one of those very straightforward beer. If it smells good and it tastes good, it is good, right?
Yeah, and this is just bursting with melanoidin.
Yeah.
Which is something we talk a lot about on the show. And just quick refresher. Melanoidin is like a bread, like a baking bread type of smell.
Bread. It's a great way to put it.
Which is what my house smelled like this morning when I came in. I don't know why I got a melanoidin out of that beer.
Out of that beer?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, to me, we just brewed yesterday, and we're going to discuss this in detail. But we brewed an American Pale Ale, and we threw a bunch of hops in there. Just had a good time with it. And my fermenter out there smells like spicy, earthy, floral, citrus, all those hops that we put in there, because we did kind of run the gambit on a few different types of American hops, and it just smells like heaven. I actually texted Bono because I just replaced an airlock and it had blown out just a tad, and went ahead and replaced the airlock and got it back and going, and it was just, I wanted to leave my head in that cooler. I didn't want to go.
And maybe that's why mine doesn't smell hoppy is because I left mine open a little bit.
Okay.
Because I don't have a temperature controller, so my cooler is just sort of at the whims of whatever temperatures are affecting it. And with that hot beer brewing inside, I didn't want it to just keep getting hotter and hotter.
Sure.
So I left it open and covered it with a Cuban flag to keep light from getting in there. So maybe those bready type of fermenting smells were able to escape a lot better than the hops were, is my guess. Because my house really smelled like a bread factory when I got home from work.
Sure, and you're talking just different types of deals, and you had a lot of you were doing a blow-off tube, right?
Yes.
So a lot of what you were doing with the blow-off tube, you were able to eject a lot of the hops, which protein up, and that's part of what I was collecting, the different sections of the hops that happen to make it through the filters and whatnot. They're collecting a lot of the particles and they're ejecting with the tube and with the yeast. So maybe you were losing a bunch of that into the liquid, but the odor that was coming out was more of the malt backbone to the beer.
That's what I'm guessing. So we did make a beer yesterday, as we were discussing.
Yes, we did,
and we crapped our brew day pretty hard.
Pretty much from the get-go.
Yeah.
No, not from.
I mean, it wasn't anything like earth-shattering.
No,
it wasn't.
Everything was fine, but
yeah, but it was just one little annoying thing after the other. And this is what happens when you start brewing a new system. is that things come up, no matter how well you design your system, things are going to come up that you didn't imagine when you were designing it.
Right.
And so these are just things that we had not considered that we would like to share with you, just how hard we screwed up. So, Kyle, where do we begin?
Well, let me trace it back to, let's go to Friday night. Or
Right.
Saturday night, excuse me. But Friday night I'd already designed the recipe for the American double IPA that I was planning on brewing.
Yeah.
Realized, I got Bono coming over, and JB's going to come over and help, and, I'd really rather brew 10 gallons than 5. That way Bono could take a share. Let's just do 10 gallons. So I dumped it back and said...
So really quick, the difference between a double IPA and what we ended up making, which was an American Pale Ale. Let's just discuss that before going forward.
So basically you got two different ends of the spectrum of the same style. American Pale Ale is the bottom of the style as far as flavor and hops and everything. But it's very similar to the top end of the style, which is a double IPA or an Imperial IPA. And the Imperial is it's bigger in every aspect. Bigger hops, bigger bitterness, bigger malt backbone, usually more caramel, but there is some more, toastiness in there too, usually. But
So we're talking about the same overall flavor profiles with very slight differences. It's just a difference of how strong the flavors hit you.
Yes. And how big the beer is,
right.
In general, the alcohol content of the beer.
So the night before, we were able to take this really big beer that we had planned on making and dilute it down and water it down to a good beer, but a smaller beer.
Yes.
That we can make more of.
And, change the hop recipe a little bit from what we had in the Imperial, because the Imperial, you want just hops and hops and hops. So I had hops in the mash, I had hops first wort, I had hops throughout the entire process, including dry hopping.
Lots and lots of hops.
And so I took...
Did you end up dry hopping? You said you weren't going to dry
I'm not
hop.
going to, but this was in the Imperial. So in the American, I took out the mash hops, and I took out the... I took out Chinook entirely from the recipe. I wanted to have Chinook in there, but with the...
I think that's what I dry hop with.
Yeah, that would be a good one. And, we've got some here, too, if you need it. But the things that I liked about, and by the way, if you see us beating our heads, it is because we have mental tics. It's not because there's flies. It's mental tics.
Mental tics.
But anyway, we ended up going out and redesigning the beer the last second, which is okay, and we had most of the ingredients, so it didn't really change much. But the big reason, there's two things. The fact is, you need a lot of yeast for an imperial version of something.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to I want to brew this imperial version and dump it on top of this yeast cake that we have already got fermenting and doing its thing from this smaller beer, which is a great way to do things. It's ramping it up. The best thing to do is pitch on as much yeast as possible, and if you're doing something really big, you want it even bigger on the yeast. Not just like double the yeast. You sometimes need 4 times as much yeast. So
we crapped our brew day.
There.
But when we redesigned our...
Then I made my starter and decided to burn myself because of my my OCD.
It burned himself pretty good.
Yeah.
It's thoroughly revolting.
It's technically a second-degree burn at this point. The bubble was about the size of a quarter, and it popped last night when I was cleaning up the brewery. I was like, okay, I'm going to pick up and put this one more thing away, and I just popped that bubble and went, oh, that's going to start to be much more painful than it is. So, been getting through it, though. It's actually not as bad as I would have thought. Put a bunch of aloe on there, but that was my second crap the brew day, and like I said, it was my OCD. I was brewing something, and I wanted to get the last bit of malt that was in the side of what container I was brewing in to make this starter, and I was splashing it around, and I splashed it on my finger. That's all that happened.
Speaking of getting splashed while messing with hot liquid, when we're done with our boil, we like to whirlpool. We like to whirlpool the wort.
Yeah.
And what that does is that helps settle out a lot of the hops, a lot of the spare gunk, just a lot of the stuff that could end up floating around in there. It helps it settle it out.
Right.
And I was stirring, and I stirred a little too hard, and I splashed myself with boiling wort. So that was a lot of fun. This part of my face, you can't see it, but I can feel it. I can feel it pretty bad.
Well, you had sunscreen on, so it didn't burn as bad.
That's true. I did not have sunscreen on, actually.
Oh, I thought you did. You brought me sunscreen back.
No, she gave it to me. I didn't use it.
Oh, okay. Well,
more importantly, do we have the handles, by the way? Because I really want to show the handles.
Which handles?
The ones that melted.
Oh, I think I threw those out.
Okay.
But yeah, that was another thing we did.
We're trying the new brew system.
Right.
We've only brewed on this once.
You can check out some pictures on Facebook.
Yeah.
I need to add some more updated ones of the actual brew day. I think I did. I did last Monday when I was brewing. There's some pictures up there on my Facebook. So check that out and see what we're talking about with the system. But then, Bono, go on.
Yeah, so
Thank you, Drew.
the kegs that we use, the kegels, they have nozzles on them, and the nozzles have valves with rubber handles. Well, these rubber handles sit, 6 inches above the flame?
Yeah, about that.
Somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 inches
Probably.
above the flame. And it's never been a problem because we've always used smaller burners with less heat.
Less smaller regulators.
Right, and surely you can see where this is going, that we're applying a lot more heat than we're used to.
And apparently,
on Sunday.
thanks to the 20 mile per hour to 30 gusting winds,
It was blowing flame right into the rubber handles, which promptly melted.
Yes. So we melted all the little rubber handles, which I never liked those anyway.
Yeah,
and it's not the first time we've gotten one of those really hot. There's a reason
it
why
isn't.
one of those kegs.
Yeah, well, one of them was already missing one.
Because it wasn't, but that one was because we had a burner going over here, and we had the nozzle turned on the old system. But anyway, it's blowing the wind up. So that was one of the other issues. Was these burners are super hot. Last Monday, I went from to my mash water. I went from room temperature water to up to 165 mash in strike temperature, like that. Took about maybe 15 minutes. And then I got done with the boil, or to send it to the boil. Probably took 20 minutes to get it to a full boil.
Yeah.
And then it was like, stand back, turn it all the way down to a trickle, and it was great. This last go around, it took us every bit of 45 minutes to get to a boil.
It took a long time to get to a boil.
I think we were probably at a low-end boil earlier than that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't enough to produce a hot break. It wasn't enough to do any of that stuff.
We crapped our brew day on the way to the boil.
We did. Because at what point JB was asking me how we pull our wort out, and I showed him the dip tube that I forgot to
Which should have been in the wort, but it was not. Now, this is what we use.
Oh, shoot.
Shouldn't that be in there?
Well, the sad thing was I actually took it out to show him. And then didn't put it back in.
Here's what happens is, in order to get wort beer from the kettle into the fermenter through the chiller, which was another adventure we'll discuss here in a minute, you have to siphon it out because the valve sits about that far above the bottom of the kegel. But we've created a siphon using some copper pipe that the siphon goes down to the bottom of the kegel so we can get every last drop out of the kegel. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is that the siphon is removable. It screws in and out so that we can clean it, because you don't want a dirty siphon.
Right.
And that's great, but it's also bad because I'd say 2 times out of 3 when we brew,
we always forget that.
We forget to put the siphon in.
Usually we remember before we get the mashed or the boil tun all the way filled up.
Right.
Usually we remember we're able to get it.
Not this time.
This time it was full. So we decided there's a couple of options.
And the handles were melting.
We could have taken this and we could have just given up the last gallon and a half of wort and maybe tipped the bucket when we were actually going and transferred in some more trub because the port's on the side. We had options, but we chose, no. We're going to do it right. So we transferred that beer to a different boil kettle because the hot liquor tank was basically not doing anything, so it becomes a boil kettle. Transfer it over there, put that back in place, and we boil on the hot liquor tank, basically.
So we boiled, and then we were ready to siphon beer. We now had a siphon, so we were ready to siphon.
There's a lot of other stuff going on during the mash. I think
a lot of stuff went wrong.
And I forgot to turn on the hot liquor tank to get the sparge water ready in time. But also, I didn't wait that long, but the wind blowing all that heat just didn't let the hot liquor tank go as fast as we thought it would. And then we ended up taking I think we sparged way too fast. I think we transferred everything in between about maybe 8 minutes or so. It's probably all it took, maybe 10, which is okay. It's okay to sparge that fast, but what you end up doing is you leave a lot of sugar in the grain because it's rinsing too fast. And I think that's what we did. we left too much sugar in the grain because we only hit about a 70% efficiency, and I think on that brew, the way we did everything, it should have been more like a 75 to 80. Okay. So I think next time, stirring once or twice during the circulation of the mash and making sure we don't transfer so damn fast, because we can control it so much with the valves and the pumps. It's great.
Speaking of the pumps, we clogged the lines to one of our pumps when we were ready to chill.
When we were ready to chill, we did not use a hop sack or any type of hop strainer. The idea was we wanted as much of that liquid filtering back through those hops at the bottom of the tank when it was coming through to get that big flavor and aroma to still come through. And I think it did. I'm happy about that.
Yeah, it did.
But we did get a couple of pieces of hops that we had to take that dip tube and turn it to the side so that it would stop sucking in hops. And then it worked fine. But, it took us probably an extra 15, 20 minutes after the flame out to get the beer to the chilling
actually
point.
Moving, yeah.
And then once we got it there, it was 10-minute chill. We've got a pretty good chilling system now, so we were pumped out of the kegel and in there. All in all, the main problem then was we lost about 30 minutes to 45 minutes that we would normally be cleaning stuff. And during the brew process, it's so much easier while things are hot and the stuff's not caked on there and sticky from cooling off and sticking to the sides. So much easier just to clean it right then. And we just did not. And so we ended up with another 30, 45 minutes worth of cleaning at the end of it. So it turned out to be slightly under a 7-hour brew day. Which, not the longest.
No.
But pretty long. Pretty long.
So lessons learned.
I'd say the big one is, we need to pay more attention at the mash. I also did not preheat the mash tun like I normally do. Okay. So since I didn't do that, the sparge water...
That's definitely a big part of it.
I missed my calculation. The sparge water only hit about 145 and I was aiming for 150. And you can counterbalance that. You can put more hot water in than is supposed to be in.
But then you water down your enzymes.
And that's what I ended up doing. I added about half a gallon to a gallon, got it up to 152 right where I was aiming. A little less than 151.5, but pretty good. So it sat at 140 or 145 for probably 10 to 15 minutes, which is no problem. Right. And then it went and set the rest of the mash at 155. So we're talking a lot of big words now. So learn that we can fix our efficiency on the mash.
We can fix our efficiency. We learned that we still need to keep the siphon plugged in, but we've learned that about a dozen times.
Yes, once again, we have learned the same lesson.
And we've learned that boiling wort is pretty hot.
Yes, and in any situation, because boiling wort burnt both of us on 2 consecutive days.
So fantastic stuff.
You also burnt your hand a little bit when we were moving a bunch of stuff and trying to clean everything and get.
Apparently, when a kegel is sitting on a burner that has a lot of flame coming out, it gets warm. Yep. And you shouldn't touch it with your hand or any other part of your body. So that's the lesson I learned.
We also ended up putting up street signs on our brew system. Which,
yes, that's true.
Which we're very happy with the look of our. I
think it's great. It really has that special white trash.
We don't give a shit
that we're going for. Yeah,
which I think pretty much everybody needs to know about us. That even if we do give a crap, we want to exude that we don't.
Right. It's very important. It's a big part of our image.
Right. We definitely don't want people to think we try too hard, because usually that's not so hard for them to fathom. But it was a good brew day. We learned a lot about the brew system. We learned that Bono's not tall enough to see into the keg.
I'm not, actually.
So
I can do it when I stand on my tiptoes.
It's not that far off, but I mean But one of the other things is talking to somebody today who he does not like that he has cut-off kegs, like what JB uses.
Right.
He has 2 of those, and I told him that's funny because he's trying to make some new kegs so that he's got full-size kegs with handles. And I said that's funny because I'm kind of looking for kegs without handles.
Whoa, no.
So
stick with the handles.
You like the handles?
Yeah.
On all of them? I think it would be beneficial on the...
we can discuss this later.
I think it would be beneficial on the mash.
The audience is bored enough. Let's not bore them with that, too. Let's talk about our next beer. Okay. And then we had a viewer question that we want to discuss about getting started in brewing.
That's true.
So our next beer is...
Cardinals fan, huh?
I think that's Faulkner.
Oh, that probably is. I don't think he would blaspheme his Rangers team by being a Cardinals fan.
Just to try to piss off one of the hosts, I think that he would.
You do? Well, I've heard that Faulkner is not very much a sports guy.
He's not very bright either. So
Right, so that's possible that he would do that kind of stuff.
it's highly likely. So this beer that I'm pouring right now is Spaten Oktoberfest. And this beer claims to be this is one of two beers in the world that both claim to be the original Oktoberfest style. Now, you'll see that it pours out of a green glass. We've talked about green glass in the past. We don't like it because it tends to skunk.
It's true, it does. The one thing about these Oktoberfest styles, though,
they go quickly.
And they're not that hoppy.
Yeah, they're not that hoppy. So you don't have as much. You don't have as much opportunity for skunk, but the possibility is there. So just something I wanted to throw out there real quick. And anything in particular about this style, this particular beer?
I haven't opened it yet. I'm lagging behind you a little bit. I've got to get my Pauliner, how do you pronounce it? You have like all the special words. You said Spaten with like an CH.
I think that's pronounced Spaten. I don't know.
I have no idea. I don't claim to try to pronounce their names correctly.
Well, I listened to the radio in Oklahoma, and they've got this German guy that owns a restaurant up there, and he's very proud of the German pronunciations of all of his beers. So I listen to his commercials all the time.
I wonder if he actually does not pronounce it correct in German, but instead pronounces it with slight twang in every situation, so that everybody goes, "Wow, that guy's really German. He knows how to say words differently than I know how to say them." Because I would think that the Germanic language in general would not be that far different from ours.
I guess it wouldn't. I don't know.
Mein Freuden Leben.
Okay, so a viewer contacted us. He's viewed a couple times, and he wants to start brewing. And his question, he's a rook, and he just wants to know where to start.
Yep.
So Kyle and I both got our start differently. So let's just discuss. Let me discuss how I got started in brewing, and then you can do yours.
Sure.
And then we can compare and contrast pros and cons. The different ways of brewing are essentially boiled down to, when you're doing your mash, essentially boiled down to extract, partial mash, or all grain.
So you've got the mash is the most complicated part of the entire process.
This is where you extract starches out of the grains and turn them into sugars. And then you boil the sugars and then you ferment them. So the most variation comes in when you're extracting those sugars. And let's start with all grain and work our way, and then go extract and then look at mini mash.
Okay.
Well, when you're doing an all grain batch, you soak your grains in hot water, and this is very, very basic. You soak your grains in hot water, and the hot water extracts starches, which are turned into sugars by enzymes.
Right.
And then you pour off the water, and you now have wort. And what it essentially boils down to is malt juice.
Right, malt juice.
You've taken the sugars, the starches and sugars out of that malt, and you've made a juice. So
you have a playback error on your phone, but I don't think it's anything else.
So
we're good.
It looks like we're still good. We're still good. So anyway, when you do an extract batch, somebody else has done this for you. There's a factory somewhere that makes malt juice. They make this malt extract, and then they concentrate it down, and they sell it to you in little cans, or they dry it out and they sell it as powder.
And that's a pretty cool process.
It's a really neat process. I think we should do an entire episode on that, because that is a really neat process.
It's engineering, 909 is what it is.
Yeah, that might get a little bit cumbersome. But anyway,
we can discuss it.
Yeah, well, the important thing is that somebody else has done that first batch for you and sold you the syrup, and you just water down the syrup and go straight to the boil.
And the only reason you actually need to boil it at that point is to add hops, because hops need to be boiled for so long for them to isomerize, right? For the actual hops to bitterize the beer, if you want to say it.
I think it's bitterate.
Bitterate?
You're bitterating the beer.
Embitterib.
Embitterib. So once your beer is embitteribed, you're ready to ferment it and actually make it alcoholic. Now, the most mind-boggling approach to mashing a beer, to me, and to you, I think, as well, is the partial mash.
I started that way.
Did you?
Yeah, I never did anything but a partial mash.
I did a partial mash or two before I got into all grain. But I think what a lot of people that are getting started don't realize is that you're spending just as much time on a partial mash as you are doing all grain. The only difference, I think, is the equipment involved.
And we're actually going to be putting on a little presentation for our Cap and Hair Club meeting coming up. It'll be likely Bono and I and Chris Bradley will be discussing intro to all grain. And we'll be going way more in detail about the processes of starting all grain.
And we'll probably reprise that discussion here on the show for everybody.
Sure, probably the day before the meeting we'll go ahead and do a dry run for that. But the idea, though, with extract is that you don't need an extra set of equipment to heat water and then store water at a hot temperature for an hour.
With the grains, exactly. And that's where I started, is I started with extract. And more to be more specific, I started with a Mr. Beer.
Sure.
And I got good beer out of my Mr. Beer. In fact, P says to this day that his favorite homebrews that he's ever had was the milk stout I made with my Mr. Beer. He loves that stuff. He claims it's one of the best beers he's ever had. And it was a really good beer.
Well, and I know what you've done with that recipe. You didn't exactly follow the Mr. Beer recipe.
No.
So, yeah, he tweaked it in ways that...
I got a little carried away.
Yeah, which are good, and we found throughout our brewing years since then that what he did was very good.
Yeah, it was. And Kyle, you got started with partial mash.
I got started with partial mash. My first recipe that I did was a wheat beer, and I partial mashed the caramel, and I believe that was pretty much all that was in there, just a little bit of caramel. It's been a while, so I don't remember exactly what the recipe was. But I just did it in a little bag on the stove in a smaller pot, and just steeped that stuff in a certain amount of water, and then drained the bag, just held it over for about 2-3 minutes, and then dumped that into my boil with all the mash water, got everything boiling, and then so now I've got this water, and I dumped in the syrup, and boom, it was boiling, and then I added the hops a little bit at a time. So, anyway, we've got some people in the chat room that keep distracting us.
Sorry, we're momentarily distracted. So, how would you recommend? Like you're talking to this rook, and you say you want to get into brewing.
He says I want to start getting into brewing, but his question was, should I buy a kit, or should I go ahead and make some of my own equipment? And my answer to that is, go talk to Stubby at Texas Brewing, who's got all kinds of knowledge about that stuff, and he's got all kinds of great stuff available at good prices. Get over there to him and talk to him about buying a beginner extract kit, because I think starting with an extract is far, far easier. I did it with the partial mash, and like you said, it took me 4 batches of partial mash when I said, wait a minute, I'm reading all these things about extract people, and they're brewing in like 3 hours, and they're done, and I'm taking 5.5 and 6 hours, and then I read these all-grain people that have done a bunch of work on their equipment, and they're brewing in 5 hours, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm just the dummy here, right? I mean, partial mash is every bit as difficult as extract, but you do gain some variability in the taste of your beer, so it definitely changes what you can do from a kit, but... at first, getting your teeth cut in is extract's fine, man. Doing a kit or going to a place like Stubby's or North Texas, the homebrew store up there in Plano.
Oh, Foreman's. No.
The Kelly
homebrew headquarters.
Homebrew headquarters.
That's a really neat place.
Yeah,
and I'm with you. I would also recommend starting with an extract. And a big part of that is, like, we like to stress in our own brewing, we like to stress on the show, adding a level of complexity every time.
Sure.
And I think that there's so much going on the first time you brew a beer. Your head's going every different direction. You're really lost. And I think that going extract the first time out, it eliminates so much of the process that you can focus on the boil and you can focus on the chill and your pitch.
Yeah.
And so I think that just taking that one level of complexity out of the equation makes your brew day a lot less stressful. And when you're less stressed, you make a better beer. And there's a lot of people that turn their nose up at extract brewing. And there's full-scale commercial breweries that brew with extract.
Hey, I turn my nose up at people who do all grain but don't malt and kiln their own grains.
It really does. I've seen them do it. It's really weird.
So yeah, I mean, there's always that step you can go further, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, you go as far as you need to go to make the process and the hobby fun for you. And I've read something that recently that said you should try to brew extract until you can make a beer that tastes similar, really close to the same, with no problems, like 2 or 3 times in a row. I wouldn't go that far that you need to go.
I wouldn't go that
because
far.
They say take one recipe and brew it until you can brew it multiple times.
That involves making the same beer every time, and who wants to do that?
And that's not part of the brewing process.
I mean,
it would make you a better brewer in the end.
I suppose it would.
If you stuck through the process.
Yeah.
Now, some people love one style of beer. I know a couple people that brew all the time. They have 2 different beers that they always have. They always have those 2.
Yeah.
And occasionally they'll branch out and brew something different. But, they like their 2 beers. They've got a little pale ale and they've got like a blonde. So they got this is great for everybody who doesn't like beer, and this is great for everybody who likes beer. And they're good beers, really good beers.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he doesn't really brew too many other crazy styles.
So real quick, before we start to close out, what do you think of the Spaten?
I think it's very, very good. I put it, a peg below the Polliner, but not by much. It's more...
I feel like it's nuttier, maybe?
It's nuttier.
Yeah.
It's definitely nuttier, which isn't a bad thing.
No,
it's allowed to be. But it kind of dries the palate a little more and makes it harder to drink the next drink as fast.
And where does that nutty flavor come from? I mean, because surely they're not dumping nuts into the beer.
No. It's part of what happens in the melanoidin reactions.
Okay.
And I'm forgetting a certain term here, but it's part of what happens in the reactions in the malt and the caramelizing of the malt, and it also comes from the types of malt they use, which have those Maillard reactions that happen in the caramelizing of those malts as well.
Great.
So, yeah.
So, what did we learn tonight?
Well, we learned that even when you've brewed a lot, you can still crap a brew day left and right.
You absolutely can. We learned that Spaten and another brewery both claim the first Oktoberfest, but we didn't mention that other brewery, so I don't think we should mention it now.
Okay.
Well, you'll have to watch next fall to find out.
Hacker for sure.
Hacker score.
Hacker for sure. Anyway, yeah, there's multiple brewers that claim to be the first one to make this style, but it was kind of more or less the style that was being made in that time period. And
I recommend that you go out and get a Hacker Score Oktoberfest and get a Spaten Oktoberfest. Decide for yourself which one's better. And while you're doing that, we'd like you to keep in mind that we are not professionals.
So please try this at home.
Agitation, frustration, memorization of the things I'm gonna do to you. This magical and powerful addiction to the pain affliction on your porcelain skin.